everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Beth, the support nurse at WMUK, for anyone who doesn't know me. And we're very lucky to be joined tonight by Abby, who's a Macmillan specialist dietitian at North Bristol NHS Trust, who's going to be talking to us about diet and WM. So just a bit of housekeeping before I let Abby talk to us. We're recording this so we can put it on our website for those who can't make it this evening, so just be aware that we are recording. After Abby's done her talk, there'll be loads of time to ask questions. If you don't want to ask questions yourself, then you can type them in the chat box and I can read them out for you. And lastly, just wanted to ask everyone to check they're on mute when they're not speaking, just so we can hear everyone clearly. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Abby.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay here. As Beth said, my name's Abby. I'm one of the dietitians working at North Bristol Trust. I'm just going to attempt to share my screen. So let's see if this works. Right. There we go. Beth, could you just tell me that that's come up?
Yeah, we can see that. That's perfect.
Lovely, lovely. So I'll go ahead. So I'm here today, well, this evening, to talk to you about nutrition and WM. I'm not going to attempt to say it 'cause it's a bit of a tongue twister for me. Apologies. So this evening we'll just go over following a healthy, balanced diet. In regards to that, we'll talk a little bit about the World Cancer Research Fund recommendations, diet on treatment, difficulty eating, and then we'll do a bit of a question and answer session at the end. So first of all, just going over, I would like to just caveat this evening and just say that the following advice is appropriate for anyone with WM. However, if you do have any other health conditions that require specific dietary advice, do follow that advice because that's likely going to take priority. If the advice for your other condition conflicts with the advice that I'm giving today, the best thing to do would be to talk to your own healthcare provider. They should have a dietitian that is linked in with their service, whether that's your GP or your hematology team. So do contact them for more specific advice if you need it. First of all, then going over a healthy, balanced diet. A healthy, balanced diet is really, really important for our immune system. It's really important for our energy levels. There's also evidence to say that a healthy, balanced diet reduces risk of complications of treatment, and it also helps us retain our strength and resilience. So all round, it's just really important to do. But what does a healthy, balanced diet look like? Well, there are some main recommendations that we use within the sort of cancer world, which is the World Cancer Research Fund recommendations. I don't know if anyone's heard of this charity before or these recommendations, but these are some recommendations based on evidence collected from all around the world. So, what this charity does is they analyze all of that evidence and work out where the links are between diet and lifestyle. Now, this is for cancer prevention primarily, but the evidence also suggests that following a diagnosis of cancer, um, these recommendations are still appropriate to follow. So, the first one being, we would recommend you to eat a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans. So, whole grains, that relates to whole grain carbohydrates. So, we're talking your bread, rice, pasta. All of those should be whole grain varieties or brown varieties. The reason being is that they have a much, much slower release of energy throughout the day. So that helps us maintain our blood glucose rather than getting much sharper spikes that you would with the white versions. Fruits and vegetables, they're really important in the diet to give us our vitamins and minerals, but also to give us fiber to keep our bowels nice and healthy. And then we've also got beans. That does actually include lentils and pulses as well. So they're really important in our diet to give us protein sources and again, lots of fiber. Next, we'd say to limit consumption of red and processed meats. The reason being is there is a link between red and processed meats and colorectal cancer specifically. So, red and processed meats is your beef, lamb, pork, but also any meat that is processed. So, chicken nuggets or I don't know, turkey dinosaurs, that sort of thing. We'd say to keep those to a minimum, have a maximum of 2 portions of those a week. Then we've got limiting consumption of sugar sweetened drinks. So we'd advise you to keep those to an absolute minimum if you can. The reason being is the evidence suggests that if you have a higher intake of sugar sweetened drinks, that increases your risk of overweight or obesity, and that in turn increases your risk of any type of cancer. Then we've got limit consumption of alcohol. Consumption of alcohol is linked to actually quite a wide range of cancers. So I'd really recommend for anyone to keep that to a minimum. And then, particularly if there is anyone on treatment here, I'd say try and avoid it altogether just whilst you're on treatment. Obviously, if you are having any alcohol, try and stay within the government recommendations of 14 units per week, and that is for both men and women. The other lifestyle recommendations as part of the World Cancer Research Fund includes also being a healthy weight. So if you're unsure about whether your weight is healthy or not, you can go onto the NHS website and search for the body mass index calculator. You can put in a few details there, so your height, your weight, your ethnicity, and it will tell you whether you've got a healthy BMI or not. Um, and then it will tell you whether you need to gain weight, lose weight. We'd recommend a BMI between 20 and 25 if you know your BMI already. We would also advise you not to use any supplements for cancer prevention or for cancer treatment. Now, when I say supplements, I'm not talking about any iron supplements, vitamin B12, vitamin D, etc. Those are absolutely fine for you to take. When I'm talking about supplements in terms of cancer prevention, I'm talking about supplements that are the herbal supplements that you may see recommended online, such as turmeric or lion's mane mushrooms or shiitake, those sorts of supplements. There's no evidence base behind the use of any of those for either prevention or to um, get rid of cancer. And then lastly, the other lifestyle recommendation is to be physically active. So that's 150 minutes a week is what's recommended of moderate activity. So anything that's going to really get your heart rate up, get you feeling a little bit hot under the collar, um, and maybe needing to take a layer off. Doesn't matter what exercise it is. Any exercise is absolutely fine. It's just about getting your heart rate up. So linking in with those recommendations, I've also brought today the Eat Well guide. Now, this I'm sure is much more familiar to you all, but this is how your diet should generally look like as a whole. It used to be called the Eat Well plate, but it's now called the Eat Well guide because we know that your diet should look like this as a whole, not every single plate, because you're not going to get all of these food groups at each mealtime. For example, you may have more of a carbohydrate based meal for breakfast, maybe cereal, and then you may eat more of your fruits and vegetables throughout the rest of the day. This guide links in really well with the World Cancer Research Fund because, as you can see in the green, you've got
Sorry, Abby, I
your.
don't think we can see the plate. I think it's stuck on the
Oh,
last. Oh, there we are. I can see it now. Sorry about that. Carry on.
sorry. No, that's okay. It's taken a little bit of time to load. Um, so with the Eat Well plate, can you see the green section now? Um, that's got all of your fruits and vegetables. So the recommended amount is 5 portions a day, and a portion is about one handful. Then in the yellow section, you've got the whole grain carbohydrates, like I discussed earlier as well. Um, Again, your bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, they'll give you lots of energy. So the whole grain versions will give you that slower release of energy throughout the day. In the pink section down the bottom, we've got the protein sources. So that'll be your meat, fish, um, beans, lentils, pulses, eggs as well. Obviously, choosing the white meats where possible. And if you are having the red or processed meats, try and make sure they're low fat and low salt. Then in the blue section, we've got dairy. It's really, really important for your calcium intake. So we would recommend for you to have a couple of portions of those in the day. In the tiny little section, you've got purple, which are your oils and spreads. They're also really important for um, your fat soluble vitamins. So you do actually need some fat in the diet. I would just encourage you to make sure it's your healthy fats. So using vegetable oil with cooking or using a vegetable oil spread instead of butter. Then in the bottom left corner, we've got all of those lovely foods that I'm sure, all enjoy. Um, they're not actually included in the circle in the Eat Well guide because our body doesn't need them to function. It's just nice to have them. We'd recommend for you to keep them to a minimum where possible. I know it's pretty impossible to get rid of them completely in the diet, but it's just about keeping them to a minimum. And then lastly, we'd just encourage you to make sure you're drinking well. So lots of water throughout the day, about 6 to 8 glasses if you can. Uh, your fruit juice, your sugar sweetened drinks, tea and coffee, um, they they do count towards your fluid intake. We just say to keep them to a minimum and try and focus on water instead. Obviously, this Eat Well guide is quite westernized. So, for anyone who is of an ethnic minority background or follows a vegan diet, there are also Eat Well guides that are more appropriate for you. I am just flicking through them, but I'm wondering if they're showing up. Are they
Yes, they
showing up
are.
at all?
Yeah, we can see them.
Yeah, lovely. It's probably best to perhaps find them yourselves. You can just type it into Google if you need to. Um, so just some tips on how to eat a bit more healthily if you feel that you need to increase the amount of particularly fruits and vegetables in your diet. That's what most people struggle to fit in their week or day. Um, So using frozen foods like frozen vegetables, frozen fruit, absolutely fine. It makes it really easy to just pop into a sauce when you're cooking your evening meal, or with fruit, you can blend it up into a smoothie. Frozen fruits and vegetables actually have the nutrients locked in at their freshest point, so they're really good to have. Tinned items are also absolutely fine. Again, nice, quick, and easy to prepare. Do try and use the ones that are either in their own juices or um, like plain water rather than the ones that are in syrups or brines, etc. Some people find it easier to batch cook meals and freeze for later. It can be quite laborious to cook a healthy, balanced meal every single night. So by making a larger amount of a particular meal and then freezing it for later is a really, really good way of getting some extra, getting meals in that are much healthier at home. I would also say to focus on your lower fat, high protein foods. So, in particular, that is your beans, lentils, pulses, because your protein foods will keep you fuller for longer and helps prevent you snacking on those like higher sugar, higher calorie foods that really we should be keeping to a minimum. Using the traffic light system is also really good if you're unsure about whether a food is like high calorie or particularly unhealthy or healthy. The traffic light system is a really easy way of telling whether a food is healthy or not. You can see in the bottom left there, we've got a traffic light system example. So you will always have calories, sugar, fat, saturated fat, and salt in the label. And most places now will also change the color of each section to highlight whether it's high or low. And obviously opting for more of the low section, so you want more green on that traffic light system and less of the red. Then also, some people struggle to remember what a healthy diet looks like. So some people even print off the Eat Well guide to just keep at home, so that it just reminds them what a healthy diet might look like. And then if you're not feeling up to cooking yourself, ready meals are absolutely fine to have. You can choose the healthier options again by using the traffic light system from your average shop like Sainsbury's, Tesco's, etc. All of your other supermarkets there, or a couple of websites. So Cook, Wiltshire Farm Foods, and Oak House Foods. They all make some really good, healthy ready meals. So they could be good options for you as well. So, just moving on to eating and drinking, if you're on any treatment, we would still advise you to follow a balanced diet wherever possible. Some of you may be advised to follow safer eating guidelines whilst on treatment. And that's because on treatment, you may have a risk of neutropenia or a low blood count. And what we don't want is to introduce any foodborne infections. So, foodborne infections can come from, for example, blue cheese. You can literally see the bacteria. We just don't want your body fighting off anything it doesn't need to, particularly if it doesn't actually have that immune system to do so. So, we'd say try and avoid that if those foods if possible. There is a really, really good leaflet by Blood Cancer UK called Eating Well with Blood Cancer. So that's the little section of booklet you can see in the bottom right, and that goes over everything about your safer eating guidelines in a lot of detail. So it would be worth logging on to the Blood Cancer UK website for that advice if you need it. If you're unsure, best bet is to ask your hematology team or your consultant. The other thing on treatment is that some treatments do have specific interactions. For example, some treatments interact specifically with starfruit and some interact with grapefruit. Your healthcare provider should have told you already if your treatment interacts with those fruit foods, because they should have told you to avoid them. Um, if in doubt, just check with your healthcare provider as well. Um, some people have difficulty eating whilst on treatment, in which case we would actually encourage you to have those higher calorie, typically unhealthy foods to really maximize the nutrition in what you're eating. So, ways to add in extra calories would be by having lots of snacks, so crisps, cakes, biscuits, adding lots of dairy products in as well, so yogurts and cheese, they're great for calories. You've got your healthier sources of high calories as well. So your nuts and seeds are fantastic for adding in calories, as are avocados, and then also just your basic olive oils or nut oils as well. In particular, if you're having difficulty eating, you could also try adding extra calories to your meals by grating extra cheese on top, drizzling lots of extra oil on top, maybe melting some extra butter in. Also, try and have little and often. So rather than facing three big meals throughout the day, try and have um, perhaps three smaller meals, but then adding in those high calorie foods like your cakes, crisps, biscuits, as little snacks in between, so that overall your calorie intake is where it should be. In particular, if you're feeling any nausea, dry, cold, bland foods tend to be much better. So, dry biscuits, crackers, for example, or buttered toast that's a little cooler. Anything that's not particularly offensive. So, for example, spice would typically be a no go, or anything that's really, really fragrant and rich tends to make nausea worse. So, try to avoid those. Ginger biscuits and ginger tea can sometimes help quell the nausea. Otherwise, it's a case of maybe talking to your healthcare provider about getting some anti sickness. And if you're already on one, do be aware that there's lots of different anti sickness medications out there. So it might be that you just need to try a different one. Some people may also experience taste changes. Having a metallic taste in the mouth is quite common. So, for that, we'd actually say to try using wooden or plastic cutlery because uh, the metal utensils make the metallic taste worse, and using the wooden or plastic cutlery takes that metallic taste away. Some people also find it really beneficial to suck on pineapple chunks. There's an enzyme in pineapple chunks that is said to wake up the taste buds. Although there's not a huge amount of actual evidence on that, it is mostly anecdotal. I would also say do not do this if you've got ulcers, because the pineapple chunks are just too acidic. They'll make it a bit worse. Again, dry, cold, bland foods can also be helpful with people experience taste changes. So anything that's quite offensive, like curries, etc., might be difficult as well if you have taste changes. If you're experiencing any diarrhea, try and eat less fiber. So peel the skins of your fruits and vegetables, remove any piths or pips or any stringy bits, because that can exacerbate your diarrhea. Obviously, you're losing a lot of fluids with diarrhea, so naturally you'd probably want to try and replace them. But what I would say is try and sip fluids slowly rather than drinking them really quickly, because actually, um, drinking fluids really quickly actually worsens diarrhea. The complete opposite goes for constipation. Actually, try eating more fiber. So, try eating more fruits and vegetables, particularly with skins on where appropriate. Um, Keep up with your fluids, and actually keeping active and mobilizing really helps loosen up everything in your abdomen. If you're sort of following all of this advice, choosing all the high calorie foods, adding extra calories to your meals, trying to eat little and often, and you're still losing weight, I would say speak to your healthcare provider and ask for a dietitian referral. Going forward, if you do want to look into any further diet and WM advice, I'd say use reliable information sources. The internet is a great tool, but unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation out there. So, the most appropriate resources for you is likely to be Blood Cancer UK, Cancer Research UK, and WMUK. They'll be your best sources. For any nutrient specific information, the BDA is really helpful. And then some more for more generic information around any cancer and diet, you can look to the World Cancer Research Fund and Macmillan Cancer Support for further advice. And actually, I've whizzed through that, so that's the end. Any questions?
That was
I am just
brilliant.
going
Thank
to
you, Abby.
stop sharing this if I
That was
can.
fantastic, really interesting, really helpful. I didn't know there were different eat well guides for, people on a vegan
Yeah.
diet and things. That's really, I've learned a lot from that as well. So
Mm.
it's loads of time for questions now. So if you want to click the raise hand icon and then I can call you in to ask a question to Abby about anything diet or nutrition related. Or as I said before, you can write your question in the chat box and I'll read it out. We've already got one question in there. Someone's asking, they were advised to peel apples and pears because the peel could cause problems. Does that make sense? Is that something you've heard of before, Abby? Don't know if this person's on treatment or on actual
Mm.
monitoring.
It in Without knowing the specifics around it, I wouldn't be able to comment.
Yeah.
Peel of apples and pears um, is largely quite high in fiber, so I'm wondering if there's any reason to avoid any fiber. Um, Otherwise, is it related to treatment? I'd say follow the advice that's given by the healthcare provider there, without any sort of extra information there.
Oh yeah, they've just oh there we
Oh,
are. So
sorry.
they've just sent in
I
saying
don't
that
think
they
I
had
can see the chat, sorry.
oh no, that's okay, I'll read it out. So they had some if it was if they had loose stool, which they don't, it was generic
Ah,
advice, so he'll ignore it. Um
perfect. Yeah, yeah. So, like I said earlier, with diarrhea, sometimes reducing fiber can help minimize that diarrhea, because fiber, particularly insoluble fiber in our diet, um, just whizzes through because we don't digest it. And when it whizzes through, it brings out lots of water in our stools as well. So if you're having diarrhea, getting rid of that insoluble fiber can really, really help sometimes.
Great, thank you, Abby. And Will, you're the first person with your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Go on then. Yeah, I'm afraid I might have three, uh, but you touched on starfruit and grapefruit and Seville oranges, which I'm now on my second clinical trial for drugs and have been warned off those, which is no great problem. Um, Cheap marmalade, I don't think they bother making it with fancy Seville oranges, so I kind of reckon that's probably okay.
Yeah, you should be fine. Um, they should specify what oranges they've used on the back of marmalade. If they don't, you'll be absolutely fine.
That okay, good. That's what I was thinking. Something that the new trial has flagged up that I don't really understand. It just cropped up after I
Hmm.
started. It wasn't any preliminary paperwork. Is curcumin?
Mm.
Oh, okay, that's interesting then. Why might I be advised to avoid curcumin, and what does it actually crop up in? Can I still eat curries?
So curcumin is an element within spices, but particularly turmeric. Um, that advice is likely related to high dose curcumin. So
Okay, yeah.
you can buy high dose turmeric capsules over the counter, and there is a lot of people who use it as a form of either cancer prevention or to treat their cancers.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
there's no evidence behind the use of it, and actually, there's some evidence to say it may interact with treatments. Turmeric in curry is absolutely fine, just don't take the high dose supplements.
Thank you so much. That's
No worries.
very, very reassuring. And last but not least, uh, the um, the medicine that I'm on now just started on sonrotoclax, and part of the protocol there is that you need to eat it within 30 minutes after eating a low-fat, high-protein meal. So I'm eating a lot of porridge, I'm not putting the boiled egg in the porridge as well, which was their sort of example menu might be
Hmm.
a boiled egg and some porridge. I've no idea why, but I'm just eating a lot of porridge. And any pointers onto other sort of
Tricky. What? How many times a day do you need to take that
once? So,
medication?
so
Just the
it's
once.
just getting up, making porridge, eating porridge, taking
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
drugs.
absolutely. To make the porridge low fat, you would obviously need to use either water or the skimmed milk. Is that something that
Mm.
you're doing? Yeah.
Semi-skimmed. Their example
Okay.
menu did allow a glass of milk and the boiled
Perfect.
egg and the porridge. So
Yeah. Perfect. I guess it's quite hard to make your breakfast really high protein. You could alternatively use like a high protein yogurt with your with your porridge.
mhm.
Some people do overnight oats. The high protein yogurts tend to have a lower fat content, so that would be appropriate um, for you to have mixed in with your porridge oats, or you could make it up with water and then add a dollop in to make it a bit creamier.
Okay, yeah.
Um, yeah, and then yeah, your egg is going to be a good source of protein on top of that. So your porridge and egg combination, as it were, sounds pretty okay. Is
Mhm.
Did you want to change that?
Yeah, because it's a 5-year trial. Might get a
Yeah,
bit dull. So yeah, just sort of um, and I think I struggle without context and
yeah,
not with the drug company not saying why it is that they want this.
yeah.
Is it? Am I going to die if I eat the medicines without doing
I
this? Am
highly,
I going to get a poorly tum? Am I
yeah,
going to get
yeah.
indigestion, that kind of stuff?
I don't know that trial in particular,
Mm,
but it's most likely to do with the absorption.
right. Okay.
So it's quite likely that fat may inhibit it, and you need the protein to be able to enhance the absorption. Is what I would say with an educated guess. But like I said, I don't know that trial or that medication in particular. Other high protein, low fat options could be, for example, egg on. Would you ever have egg on toast or beans on toast?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually with a bit of butter though, which is naughty.
Maybe, yeah, keep that to a minimum if you can.
Yeah.
You could try choosing the low fat alternatives, the low fat spreads.
Yeah. True. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
Thank you very much, particularly around the curcumin. That's a
Yeah,
lifesaver because
yeah.
very boring without curry. Right, I'm going to shut up and let somebody else go. Thank you so much.
No
Thanks, Will.
worries.
So, Rachel, you're the next with your hand up.
Hello. Yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
jolly good. Yes, you just touched on it there about live food, about
Yes.
the blue cheese. I'm not currently on
Mm.
any treatment, but
Mm.
obviously I'm really interested in, before I was diagnosed, I had a lot of prebiotics and probiotics.
Mm.
And sort of you hear all about gut biome and how important it is. But I didn't know whether when you've got WM, if that's a good thing to continue to do or whether you should stop it because it's something that obviously the overreaction of your cells, whether that it's something they're going to be trying to fight off and whether it actually won't be beneficial at all. So I'm just really interested in that.
Mm. Really, really good question. I think it would really, really depend on what your blood count is.
Hmm.
So primarily when you're on treatment, depending on the treatment type, that can make your blood count go through the floor. And so essentially, you don't have an immune system whilst on treatment, or at least temporarily through each cycle. And there's just a risk of an increased risk of foodborne infections at that time, and
Hmm.
because you don't have an immune system to fight it off. If you're not on treatment and your immune system is, as far as you're aware, absolutely fine, then you will be a-okay to go ahead with having your probiotics, your blue cheese. It's absolutely fine. It's only if you're at risk of neutropenia.
Okay.
Does that answer
Okay.
your question?
Yeah. So it wouldn't really make any difference whether I can't continue with probiotics and prebiotics, or would you
Not
recommend to just leave them at the moment?
not in terms of your WM, it's not necessarily going to impact it. You may want to have those products for general gut health, in which case, absolutely fine. Um, some people really find them beneficial, particularly if they have other health conditions, for example, IBS or any other gut issues. In
Yeah,
which case, I'd say, yeah, definitely continue them. Um, it's up to you whether you find any benefit in them. There's no
sure.
evidence to say it would benefit or make things worse with WM.
Okay. All right. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Molly, you were the next with your hand up. Oh, you're still on?
Hi.
Oh, there we are. Go on.
Hi. Yeah, oh, my whole day is WM because is this Beth, the other person? I think, did I meet
Yes.
you in London on the 21st of
Oh,
September?
yeah.
Yeah. So
Hello.
I live in St. Leonard's in Sussex, but also Los Angeles. And I've just flown in today to Boston to see the doctors at Dana-Farber and had another bone marrow biopsy. My whole day is WM, and I had this on my calendar before I fly right back. But this is like the best of a bad option is I'm a snacker, and it's really hard for me to cut. But I can go salty and fat or sweet. If we're trying to cut back, which is worse? Like, should I have crisps or a cupcake? Like, I've been told that sugar is really bad for cancer, but I don't, before I cut everything out, what's the gradual way?
It will be very individual depending on everyone's circumstances. So, for example, if you have high blood pressure, I'd say cutting back on your high salt foods would be the priority. If you have high cholesterol, cutting back on the high fat foods would be your priority. In terms of sugar in particular, there's no evidence to say that it increases your risk of cancer, nor is there any evidence to say that avoiding it will get rid of it. The reason that sugar and cancer is such a big topic is because cancer cells use sugar like the rest of our body cells do. So, all of our cells in the body, both cancer and healthy, use sugar as a form of energy. You cannot physically starve your body of sugar. So even if you don't eat sugar at all in the day, your body will either use its own stores or it will start to use its muscles to then convert to sugar to then feed the healthy cells and cancer cells. So you're actually putting yourself more at risk of malnutrition or muscle loss if you avoid sugar completely. Um, with snacking, opting for the higher protein versions may be helpful. Something like your nuts and seeds can be a good one. Um, if you can opt for the unsalted versions or the
Okay.
non-coated ones, but having a handful of salted nuts isn't going to be the end of the world. Um, some high protein yogurts, fruits and vegetables can be good to snack on, like carrot sticks and some hummus. Yeah, any snacks like that would be fine. But yes, otherwise it kind of depends what your personal physical priorities are.
Thank you. Yeah, I think some of it is just maybe gradually, not overnight, changing your palate, right? Because I like a lot of berries.
Absolutely.
Maybe if I had berries and yogurt, that would
Yeah.
take the place of ice cream,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
And what you said there is very, very key. Change doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen. As humans, we're creatures of habit. So breaking that routine, as it were, or what you're used to, can be very, very difficult. So usually it takes a couple of months to break a habit, to be honest. So it will take some thought to begin with, but I'm sure as you start to get used to it, it will become second nature.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Marley. That's great. And we've got a couple of questions in the chat as well. So first one, is it safe to eat eggs with uncooked yolks? For example, poached or boiled eggs?
So preferably cooked. There is the previous thought risk was to do with salmonella, particularly in eggs and chicken. The salmonella risk is much, much lower in the UK these days, but I would say err on the side of caution and just cook your eggs thoroughly.
Great, thanks, Abby. And the second question in the chat is from Caroline. Are kefir drinks and raw oily fish okay, as these were recommended by her doctor for IBS, and also turmeric tablets were recommended by her doctor for arthritis?
So kefir will be fine unless you're on treatment that will it puts you at risk of neutropenia. So if your blood count is low on treatment, I'd say no kefir drinks because they do have bacteria in, which could be a source of infection. Raw oily fish, that's not one that I've been asked before. I would say unfortunately not, because we don't know what there is in that raw oily fish. We don't know the quality. I'm sure if it was much higher quality fish, then it might be okay. But I'd err on the side of caution. Again, this is only appropriate for if you're at risk of neutropenia. Um, if you're not at risk of neutropenia, I'm sure raw oily fish would be absolutely fine. The turmeric tablets being recommended by the doctor for arthritis, they'll be absolutely fine for you to take, as advised by the doctor, if you're not on treatment. If you are finding any benefit from the turmeric tablets and you're on treatment, I'd say go and speak to um, your consultant, because they would know whether there's any specific interactions with that particular type of treatment. We know there is interactions between turmeric and some treatments, but it doesn't mean there's interactions with all. Without knowing your type of treatment, I wouldn't specifically say whether you could or couldn't take it. I hope that answers the question.
That's great. Thanks, Abby. Any more questions? We've got loads of time. We've still got 15 minutes if anyone wants to ask anything diet or nutrition related. I've got a question while everyone's thinking. So heart health is super important for everyone, but especially for WMers, because your heart function's often checked before treatment, and some WM treatments like BTK inhibitors can particularly affect your heart. Is there any advice you would give people to protect their heart health in terms of diet? Any specific foods to avoid? Or
Yeah, really good question. So, heart health advice would include avoiding saturated fats. So, saturated fats are primarily the fats that you see on meat. So, by keeping your red and processed meats to a minimum, you'll mostly be avoiding those saturated fats anyway. But if you are having any red or processed meats, if you can see the visible fat on the meat, that's all saturated fat. And if you think of how it's looking at room temperature, it's quite hard, gristly. That's essentially what it's like in the arteries too. So, really, really keep that to a minimum. Take the fat off before cooking. Or if you want a bit of flavor, take it off after cooking, but preferably just get rid of that saturated fat that's visible there. The other thing would be trying to increase your intake of unsaturated fats. So they're your healthy fats, which includes your omega-3s and 6s. So good sources of healthy fats are your oily fish, whether that's raw or cooked is fine. So your oily fish, you've also got your nuts and seeds and your vegetable oils as well. So having those in the diet is really important for your omega-3s, 6s, and the fat-soluble vitamins that I was talking about earlier. They also tend to measure something in your blood called triglycerides as well. And triglycerides tend to go up, particularly with alcohol intake. So keeping your alcohol intake to a minimum can help reduce your triglyceride levels too.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abby. So we've got 2 more questions in the chat. Is coconut water preferable to other fruit juices?
Oh, very good question. So coconut water wouldn't have the sugar content that fruit juices does. So potentially yes, but if you're using it solely as a replacement for water, I'd say you don't need to have it. Coconut water is also good for electrolytes as well. Um, so it can absolutely be used as part of a healthy diet. For fruits and vegetables, sorry, for your smoothies or fruit juices, they do have other vitamins and minerals in. Not so much the electrolytes, but vitamins and minerals, which it can be useful to have fruit juices if you're not that keen on fruit. But there is a much higher sugar content, so we would actually say to keep your fruit juice intake to just 1 glass a day. Whereas coconut water, I probably wouldn't put a limit on it. So in that sense, it could be a healthier option.
Thanks, Abby. Next question, do you recommend organic foods?
Organic foods is largely down to personal preference, to be honest. There's no evidence to say that using organic foods helps prevent against cancer or helps with treatment tolerance or helps cure cancer. Um, some people prefer to opt for organic foods, which is absolutely fine. There's not really a significant nutritional difference between organic and non-organic foods. So um, I would recommend it if that's something that someone wants to follow. But if someone wants to have non-organic foods, I'd also recommend that.
Thanks, Abby. Gordon's asking, what are the benefits of avoiding a highly processed foods?
Mm. So with processed foods, you tend to have lots of additives. So lots of preservatives, particularly lots of salt added in, lots of uh, chemicals. If you look at highly processed foods, you can look at the ingredients on the back, and even I wouldn't recognize half of the list of foods that are the ingredients. And so there's just evidence to say that these processed foods in particular do have a risk, particularly of colon cancer. So it's largely to avoid that risk of colon cancer, but also to minimize the amount of additives and preservatives that you're consuming as a person. We'd always encourage people to cook from fresh where possible.
Thanks, Abby. Hazel's asking, thinking about WM in particular, is there any scientific evidence that eating certain foods can influence bone marrow as opposed to, for example, eating plenty of calcium for bone health?
So in particular to bone marrow, no, unfortunately. Um, Bone marrow is formed of essentially um, like very, very baby cells, to put it very crudely, as it were. And unfortunately, there's no evidence behind diet and increasing bone marrow health. Um, Bone health is different in that we know we need calcium to form the outside of the bone, so the hard bit of the bone, um, as well as vitamin D. So if you have any concerns with your bone health, do make sure you've got calcium and your vitamin D as well. You may need to take a vitamin D supplement or get out in the sun safely. But yes, unfortunately, there's nothing in relation to bone marrow in particular.
Okay, great. Gordon's asking about
Mm.
avoiding artificial sweeteners such as, oh, sorry if I pronounce these wrong, aspartame and acusafame.
Mm.
That wasn't right.
So difficult difficult one to say with that one, actually. So many of the food health organizations have deemed that the amount of the quantity that we would eat those sugar, like artificial sugars or sweeteners, in our diet, that it's absolutely safe. However, the World Health Organization does note that there is possibly a link, particularly between aspartame and cancer. So I'd say if you can try and just not use like added sugar or artificial sweeteners and try and go without, that would be best. If you are going to have foods that um, have either of those in, I'd just say keep it to a minimum. There's no need to completely avoid them. It's all about balance.
Brilliant, thank you. Victoria's asking, could you mention some anti-inflammatory food that's usually known to be beneficial?
So in terms of anti-inflammatory, there's no foods that you're going to be able to eat in sufficient quantities to be able to accurately say that they'd be anti-inflammatory. What we typically say is to make sure that your diet is rich in fruit and vegetables, because they have the vitamins and minerals that can help support the immune system. Um, so that would be my recommendation, really, is to have lots of fruits and vegetables. The other thing would be just making sure you've got lots of protein as well. A lot of our all of our body cells are made out of proteins, so it is really important for us to have in the diet, and that can help support the immune system as well. So again, your beans, lentils, pulses, chicken, turkey, fish, eggs.
Lovely, thanks, Abby. Andrew's asking about weight gain. So we've talked a lot about,
Hmm.
people losing weight, but what about people who are gaining weight?
Yeah. So, um, some people do gain weight on treatment, and in my experience, I've had patients who have gained weight on treatment, and um, we're not entirely sure why. So, apologies, I wouldn't be able to explain much behind it. But if you are experiencing weight gain, I would say try and follow the healthy, balanced diet that I spoke about earlier on in the session. Try and make sure that your diet's more heavy on the fruits and vegetables rather than your protein. Sorry, fruits and vegetables and protein rather than your carbohydrates, and try and keep your snacks a bit healthier as well, so higher in protein to keep you fuller for longer rather than opting for those high calorie options. If the weight gain is so extensive that it's really concerning you, I'd say talk to your consultant or hematology team.
Great, thanks, Abby. Yeah, Andrew's added that lack of exercise is a problem. I can't walk any
Oh,
distance. So
oh, okay.
yeah, I would just sort of exercise what
Yeah,
Abby said and speaking to your health care team. Because if it's a fatigue issue, then they might be able to suggest some things to help with the fatigue. If it's shortness of breath, they can look into that as well. So yeah, I would
yeah.
have a chat with you.
And depending on where you are, there are often physiotherapists who you can be referred to give you some exercises as well that may be more appropriate for you, depending on whether you've got any mobility issues or fatigue, etc. And then some, I mean, we have it here in Bristol. We have some exercise and referral schemes where you can be referred um, for support with exercising with a diagnosis of cancer. So sometimes, sorry, lots of people have found those services beneficial. So it might be worth looking into. You should be able to find that out on your own local council website if that is something that is in your area.
Thanks, Abby. Victoria says that many WM patients have anemia. Red meat could increase iron along with iron supplements.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
Jess is saying aspartame is banned in the US. So that's interesting.
Yes, so the FDA, I'm not 100% sure if they've retracted that, but yes, at some point it was banned in the US. And the World Health Organization also does believe that there is a link with cancer and aspartame. So the, the current UK guidance is that it's absolutely fine. My personal preference is to avoid it. So when I'm advising people about that, I'd say it's up to you to make your own decision. But personally, I'd avoid it.
Thanks, Abby. Victoria's asking about turmeric. Were there any clinical trials to prove that it's not beneficial that you know of?
So there's no trials to say necessarily exclusively say that it's not beneficial. There are some trials to say that it interacts with some medications, and the trials that look into about whether it is beneficial have kind of not been very good trials. They've been in small populations, so it's just not really good enough evidence for us to advise it as a form of anti-cancer treatment. So yes, there's not any particularly to say that it's definitely no benefit. It's just the trials that into turmeric to try and prove the benefit kind of haven't really found any benefit, if that makes sense. It can be a little hard to unpick sometimes, the trials.
Thanks, Abby. So it's nearly 8 o'clock. We've got a few more minutes. I'll just take one last question from the chat from Molly. What meat substitutes are considered not highly processed? What about corn, seitan, tempeh?
Really good question. With meat substitutes, it's really, really difficult to get away from the processing of it. I'd say look at the ingredients list, and try and shop for the products that have as shorter ingredients list as possible. So, for example, some corn products, they're literally just mycoprotein, some egg, and some stabilizer. And so that's probably less processed than some of the meat alternatives out there. Your Some better options are probably like your tofu, to be honest. They tend to be much less processed. But yeah, I'd say look at the back, look at the ingredients list. The shorter the list, the better.
Thanks, Abby. That's great. Well, it's nearly 8 o'clock and we need to let Abby go and have her tea now. And we all need to go and watch Bake Off. That's on 8 o'clock.
Very important.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much, Abby, again, for giving up your time. I learned loads from that,
Yeah,
never
no
mind
worries.
anyone else. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you everyone for coming and for asking loads of questions. It was really great interactive session. So just to let you know that we've got another webinar coming up tomorrow. It's about the public consultation on the changes to the NHS in England and how we can make sure that WM's voices are heard. So that's on at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. You can register through our website. And then on Thursday, we've got our next coffee and chat at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. If you haven't been to it before, it's just a really informal chance to chat with other WMers about anything you want, just share experiences and have a chat. There's no need to register. You can join via the link that's also on our website. So again, thanks, Abby, very much, and I'll see you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Yes, very much looking forward to a curry on Friday night now.
Enjoy, Will.
That's
Thank
made your
you.
week now, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Ta-ra, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Bye.